Hey, welcome to the Citizen Mike Show. Thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. My name is Mike Brudzinski, and somewhere on that screen is Republican Town Councilor Christine Tatta. Christine, thanks for coming back on the show. And congratulations on your smashing electoral victory in the last election.
Thank you.
I don't think I had a chance to, publicly say that. So good job. Last night, on December 14, Tuesday night, at a regular town council meeting, there was a lot of business. And if you were a political junkie, if you were sort of addicted to small ball in politics, tomorrow night would be a feast. Last night, would be a feast for you, because there are all these little issues dancing around, sort of insider politics. And I thought we'd dive into some of that because it was an interesting case study in small town politics. And the first one that I wanted to talk to you about was the mayor's attempt to name his choice of person to fill the Personnel and Pension Appeals Board. And so that was on the consent agenda. And in a minute, I'm going to ask you to kind of go over what that means, what the consent agenda is. But no one has really heard of this particular board, and that's because they don't do anything. The Personnel and Pensions Appeal Board, according to the town website, has not had a meeting in 4 years. The town website goes back to 2018, and nothing has happened. At least there are no minutes posted. So I'm going to assume if there's no minutes posted, they've never had any business. And this kerfluffle, a big one, over this position that really apparently doesn't mean much. So what does that board do? That board deals with disputes arising out of the administration of the pension plan. And there's some other, miscellaneous duties not worth talking about it. But that's what it's sort of known for. So Edwin Makepeace, if I'm pronouncing that right, his term was up, I think, at the end of December. The mayor was going to reappoint him for another 5-year term. It appeared on the consent agenda, which means should be smooth sailing, Edwin. What is the consent agenda? What's the significance of it? And what are your expectations when something pops on the consent agenda?
Consent agenda is a large portion of the agenda that's typically routine items, things the administration needs town council approval for, oftentimes kind of housekeeping type items. Sometimes it's small donations that we need to approve. Typically non-controversial items, typically low dollar amount items, things like that. So the chairman decides what goes on the consent agenda because he doesn't feel they really need much discussion. And then if a counselor so chooses, he or she can ask for an item to be removed, which then puts it onto the regular agenda so a full discussion can take place.
So when you heard that this appointment was going to be removed from the consent agenda, did that send up red flags? Uh-oh, something's afoot?
Yes, because I have never seen an appointment. We get appointments fairly frequently, and I've never seen an appointment be removed from consent agenda, and we had 2 removed in one night. So
who asked that Mr. Makepeace's appointment be removed for general discussion? Was it the Democrats?
It was Vinny Testa.
It was Vinny Testa. Okay. And so we have a clip. It's about, actually we have 2 clips of this debate. And this was a long debate. I think it was like 45 minutes it was long, and I've reduced it to about 6.5 minutes. Therefore, there's a lot that cannot go in here in the interest of time. And we're going to need to supplement that with our description of events. But I broke the clip into 2. And the first is about 4 minutes and 3 seconds. And what you're first going to see is Vinny Testa explaining why he took it off the consent agenda. It goes to him first because he's the one that removed it from consent. So Vinny Testa's position, as we will see, was something like this, and I'm a little casual in my talk. You know, you've been around the Citizen Mike show, you kind of get it. But his position was, hey, boys and girls, I'm removing this from the consent agenda because I can't vote yes on Mr. Makepeace, but I'm not telling you why. That's going to kind of be a mystery. And so I kind of raised my eyebrows and I said, wow, is this just a pure political play? Is this kind of the Democrats are feeling muscular at the success, you know, because of the success of the recent municipal elections? They're just pulling it off to be partisan. So then it goes to Gina Morgenstein and she says, I agree with Mr. Testa. I can't vote yes on Mr. Makepeace, but I'm not telling you why either. So I said, what is going on? Is this, again, is this a principled objection or what's happening? Then it goes to Jason Zandri. Take it from there. We'll show the tape in a minute, but what's your recollection of how he presented this?
Sure. So after the other two kind of vague comments, Jason Zandri said, you know, I think there may be people here who can explain what's going on because I think the five Republicans here tonight maybe are in the dark and don't know what's happening, which was true, at least for me. And then when it went to public comment, that's when the whole situation came out. So the issue came from a member of the public was who brought up what this problem was, not from a counselor.
Yeah, so the video clip that we're about to show does not include, so I've got to describe it here a little bit, does not include the reasons why the Democrats pulled it off the consent agenda. Apparently there was, not apparently, I'm going to use the word allegedly out of editorial caution, but I think what was described, I think actually happened. I'm just going to use the word allegedly to be careful here, but allegedly what happened was described by Riley O'Connell, the Democratic candidate for mayor. And he said something like this, that he was at Celebrate Wallingford, milling around like people do, and he encountered Mr. Makepeace, the mayor's nominee. And Mr. Makepeace began crossing the line with respect to civility, Riley O'Connell said. And there was some hard and strong language, some insults, voices were raised, and it was beyond the pale. And that finally stopped. But it happened in another occasion, another place during Celebrate Wallingford. And somehow later on, they didn't know who Mr. Makepeace was, I don't think, but he was associated with Mr. Makepeace. So now that his name is up for a piece on a spot on the board, an objection was raised. Now, again, back to the mission of the Personnel and Pension Appeals Board, one could argue, and they did, that demeanor is important. This is the person on that board has to be judge-like. You know, they're supposed to be objective and appear objective, and it may not be appropriate for a firebrand partisan to be on that board. Maybe you need someone sort of low-key who exudes judicial demeanor. And the Democrats and Riley O'Connell said, no, this is not a good fit. This spot on this board is not a good fit for this candidate. So I'm going to try to start that tape and we'll pick it up at the end of that.
I have no qualms about the process that was in place. How this appointment, a reappointment was determined. And I just personally simply wanted the opportunity to vote no, which is the only reason I pulled it off the agenda. No philosophy behind where it came from or what. So that was, I have an objection to the appointment and I just want to vote no on it. I have no intention of speaking of the person. I have nothing to say, no interest in making public pronouncements in any way, shape or form, other than I object to the appointment and I'm going to vote no on it. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Morgenstein.
I think more will be said when we get to the next item about some details of how appointments were made not following what has traditionally been done. And I would reiterate that this body, I believe, although we all come from a certain party, behaves in the best interest of the public, and observation has been made that did not seem particularly in the best interest of the public, is all I would really say, and I'll be voting no as well.
I would think that the other individuals involved here that are willing to support this vote maybe completely understand the entirety of why this item was pulled. I don't think my colleagues to the left over here understand what occurred. And I don't want to speak to it. I'd like to give an opportunity, since the two of you brought it up. If I don't know if there's more that you want to say or divulge.
Thank you. I'd like to make perfectly clear that my decision to take this position with nothing to do with an appeal from Mr. O'Connor. This was my own choice. When I saw the appointment was on here, I thought to myself, oh, no, this is a problem for me. Based on what I knew had happened, had not heard from him. I'm not doing it at his behest. He's here because he knows this is on the agenda, and he chose to share his story.
And again, I did not reach out to Riley O'Connell to come here today, but I'm glad he came, because I was only working off of what my communication was with Councilor Tatta, and I had also been reached out by two different people as well about the events that occurred. So it's better that it comes from source one than, he said, she said, second party.
I think it's very questionable that we determine someone is unsuited to technical work because they became involved in political issues that, as unsupported as or regrettable as anyone may determine, it's words during a campaign. Certainly, I don't support that type of thing, but there is such a thing as freedom of speech. I don't think that in any way impugns his ability to render appropriate judgments on contractual matters. If we start looking at those things in everyone's life, virtually we will not be appointing anyone anywhere, because it's again the case of trying to find perfection, and it doesn't exist. Mr. Makepeace has skill and ability that he has exercised in the part of the town. He had opinions, whatever, during a political campaign that are not agreeable, or maybe his method going about it isn't agreeable to all of us, but certainly that has little, if any, relevance to his ability to render judgments on contractual matters that he is assigned as part of the Pension Appeals Board.
Make a motion to table this.
Yeah, so that video ends with Craig Fishbein saying he wanted to table it. Christina, let's back up a little bit, keeping in mind that this was a collage of clips spliced together, and Riley O'Connell's, the former mayoral candidate who ran against Mayor Dickinson, his narrative describing the alleged insults that were hurled at him are not on this clip. I listened to it, it seemed credible. But why? Give us the background. Why table it? Give us the logic and the arguments back and forth.
I think one of the reasons to table it was because Mr. Makepeace was not present, and some of the comments made by councilors were that they felt he should have the opportunity to defend himself at the very least. So I think to table it would have given us the opportunity to either call him and question him about this, or given him the opportunity to show up and defend himself if he chose to do that.
Yeah. So a vote was held on the motion to table, and by a 5-4 vote, it was decided not to table it. And I think part of the logic was that Mr. Makepeace knew or should have known to be at this meeting, at this council meeting, because the person who submitted his name, the mayor, certainly knows or knew that this matter was pulled from the consent agenda. And as we agreed, I think earlier, this is a red flag. And it's traditional, I'd say easily more than 50% of the time when someone is appointed by the council or the mayor, they show up at the meeting as a sign of respect. They show up at the meeting to answer last minute questions. But when your name is pulled from the consent agenda, you know you better show up. So yeah, I think it was on that basis that people said, you know, he could have been here and he wasn't. And if he wants to come back at another meeting, you know, we would open the door again to him. And so the motion to table was denied. Now, what happened? We have a video clip of what happened next, but what happened next?
So after that, some discussion continued, and then the motion was, whether or not to approve it. And I don't know if you, spoiler alert, but it was a 7-1 vote to not approve his appointment.
Yeah, there's this one holdout that wanted to approve him. You. So
Yep.
Now is opinion time. We're going to play the clip in a minute. Now is opinion time. Give us your logic as to why you voted in favor of Mr. Makepeace.
Sure, a couple of reasons. Number one, I did vote to table, so I was hoping it went that way, and then it didn't. So when it didn't go to tabling it, now we're faced with it's yes or no, and I didn't feel the entire evening, the entire way this went down made me uncomfortable. I didn't like that somebody's reputation was kind of being besmirched in the public arena, and that's going to now be in the minutes of the town forever, and on these recordings forever. I understand it, it can happen, and it did happen, but I just thought it could have been handled a little more quietly or diplomatically. But besides that, all I had to go off of last night was what Mr. O'Connell said and my own knowledge of Mr. Makepeace. And I actually lived on his street for 10 years. Didn't have too much to do with him. We lived pretty far apart, but I have dealt with him on occasion in the past, and he always acted like a gentleman, seemed very level-headed, respectful. And so my own personal dealings with him, this alleged event just seemed out of character from what I knew. So going by just that one account and what I knew of him personally, I chose to reappoint him.
So let's talk philosophy for a minute. And maybe it's better if we do it in hypotheticals. If someone is up for an appointment to a board or commission, I'm going to throw out the concept that in a way they represent and embody the town of Wallingford. I mean, they're sort of an agent of the town. I mean, not legally, but they if they're a public official appointed or elected, they wear different suits, sort of a public persona. And if there is a good faith objection to a behavior that may inform the decision as to the fitness of someone for reappointment, isn't it fair to bring that up in a public way? I mean, there's no other real way to do it unless you've got some ideas. But isn't that what government and politics is all about? It's transparent. And, on the national and the state scene, we see this happening all the time. So on the local scene, are we just too polite to handle it that way? Just give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because I understand everything should be transparent, but when it comes to people's, reputation and things like this, I do like to think that locally we are a little bit more polite. And so, if this had been brought to us maybe privately and we could kind of talk about it, not so publicly, and maybe, contact him and ask what his side of the story was, I just would have kind of preferred that. But I do understand. I mean, it's, he's going for an appointment, and that's, it's certainly allowable. And I just think it was unfortunate how it happened.
So let's take a look at that next video. Part of what was being discussed was the said supposed due process interest of Mr. Makepeace not being there when his appointment was being discussed, but as indicated, the opportunity to be there. It appears that he opted not to be there. That's the appearance in any event. And at the end, there was a vote, as you said, 7-1 not to approve. So it appears that Riley O'Connell's narrative, was credible to most of the counselors, and in view of that, they just couldn't vote yes. Let's take a look at that video, and then we'll come back.
Councilor Tatta's point about the process, we would never say this in public. I think this is completely different than an HR personnel decision. I mean, HR personnel thing, there's an employer-employee relationship. This is nothing like that. This is just a member of the public who's applying to be on a board, a public board, and there's someone from the public is saying they witnessed behavior in public. So I don't see anything private here.
All right, first of all, I strongly object to the implication that I'm ambushing somebody for the cameras. Don't go there with me. Don't. I wasn't here to convince you of anything. I drew this, I pulled this from the agenda so I could vote no. I could have been 7-1. That's why I pulled it. I wasn't looking to convince anybody. People asked, why? Well, here we are now. I had no interest in making this a public anything, but this is how it works. The mayor makes an appointment, we approve it, or we don't. In this case, I don't want to say yes to this person. I have my own reasons. That's it. But don't imply that I'm doing this to try to do some kind of ambush for the cameras. And this is not just somebody making bad statements during a political campaign, not punishing anyone for political speech. Okay, I made a determination on what I believe is somebody's temperament to be able to serve the community. Personally, I made that judgment. Right or wrong, as is my right as the approval authority. That's as far as I was going to go with this. And I'm not saying anything more about him or anything else. Don't pull that crap.
This is a first person accusation. This isn't something someone read on Facebook. This is someone that came up with a specific charge, right? So ultimately, like Councilor Shortell says, it's going to be one person's word versus the other. We would have to make a judgment as to whose opinion we found to be most credible. So I'm comfortable with a no vote at this time. And then, if it comes back to us, I'm happy to approach it with an open mind at the next meeting.
I've never, ever seen an appointment get pulled from consent. So when I saw that, I didn't just think, I need another email to explain why. I knew something was up because it's never happened. So just for the people at home, so you don't think that, due process and this other stuff, the mere fact that this was pulled from consent by 2 counselors was a red flag.
Again, the item was withdrawn. We were all informed. The person placing the item on the agenda, could be this or anything else on consent, is informed. So and then if they've got a concern, well, why was it removed? They can go back to the person that pulled it, and then they could get some more information. So the idea here that people weren't aware, I disagree.
Yeah, Jason said he disagrees. I cut him off a little bit. So a couple things. First of all, I didn't show the dialogue. I didn't show the speech that got Vinny Testa upset in the interest of time. And I'm not really sure who said what that got him so upset. But why was Vinny Testa so upset, as far as you know?
Yeah, I think I believe it was Councilor Fishbein had said something to the effect of that this whole, it was kind of a charade, and this was all, politically motivated. And I think that Vinny Testa took a exception to that he was doing this for political reasons.
Okay, and Jason Zandri at the very end, he said the notion that someone didn't know what was going on and this was going on behind their back, he said was wrong. Do you agree with Jason, or you disagree with Jason's final comments?
So I think that comment could have been directed to something I had said, because I kind of disagree, because I had made the point that when things are pulled from consent, sometimes I don't even know until we get to the meeting. So if a counselor pulls something from consent, they email the chairman, it gets pulled. Sometimes I show up and I don't know what's been pulled, but apparently they're saying that when something is pulled, the department who requested that agenda item, in this case, the mayor, is notified that item was pulled. So Jason's argument was the mayor must have known that this was pulled and either chose to not tell Mr. Makepeace or chose to tell him, and he still decided not to show up.
So let's move on. We've got another segment, right? For those political junkies that like, political infighting, we got another one. On the agenda last night was another item on the consent agenda. It was another appointment, this time by Chairman Vinnie Cervoni. And he wanted to appoint someone to the Wallingford Housing Authority. We know that gentleman well. It's Shelby Jackson, the former assessor of the town of Wallingford, highly regarded, very well respected, got along with everyone on both sides of the aisle. His name was on consent agenda to fill the Wallingford Housing Authority spot. And that was pulled off the consent agenda. And as Chris Shortell says, well, that's a red flag. Something's up. Before I throw it back to you and ask you, hey, what's up, as far as you could tell from the discussion, I've got a trick question for you. What does Shelby Jackson and Edward Makepeace have in common? Where do their fates intersect? You don't know the answer to this. Just say, I don't know. I mean, it's easier that way. You don't know, right?
I don't think I do know.
Well, here's the answer to that question. Shelby Jackson Jr. had an item on the agenda of the Personnel and Pensions Appeals Board. There's no, for this year, 2021, for the agenda for October and November. If Mr. Makepeace had been appointed, and if Shelby Jackson, the guy who's was going to go in the Housing Authority, if Shelby had pursued his item, Mr. Makepeace would have heard it. It's just a funny coincidence how those things happen. So, okay. So Shelby Jackson is pulled off the agenda by the Democrats again. And here we go. It seems like partisan bickering, but was it? How do you assess the facts?
Well, so this one was different in the sense that Mr. Makepeace's was more of a personal issue. They had an issue with the person. Nobody has an issue with Mr. Jackson's, anything with him as a person, but I think the Democrats had a problem with the process. So Mr. Jackson is unaffiliated, but he was replacing a Democrat who had resigned from the board. And that was where the problem came in, because the Democrats felt that they should have another Democrat replace a Democrat who left.
Yeah. So as it unfolded during this discussion over Shelby Jackson's appointment, we learned, I think for the very first time, you and I and most people, that Ed Lachlan, who was on the Housing Authority, sent in a resignation to the Housing Authority in the summer of 2021. I don't think anyone knew that before that instant. And the only reason why we knew it is by coincidence, the Housing Authority was there on another item. It was just coincidence that the executive director was there and could fill in some information. Kelly McDermott said, yeah, that happened in the summer. Yeah. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, let's kind of walk through this. So Housing Authority sends something into the town clerk. Presumably that Jim Lachlan has resigned from the Housing Authority. The town clerk certainly told the chairman about it, and she didn't even need to, because the chairman, Cervoni, and Lachlan are best buddies, so they certainly talk to each other. So Cervoni knew that Lachlan was off and resigned in the summer. But here's the problem.
They work in the same office. Are they best buddies? I don't know.
So, I mean, there's no doubt that Chairman Cervoni knew about this resignation in the summer of 2021. Here's the problem in the system. When the town clerk gets a letter of this importance and the other counselors are not advised of it, isn't something broken? Serious question.
I mean, I would have liked to have received something. I can't recall, since I've been on the council, that I've ever received correspondence saying that there was a vacancy on a board.
Yeah. But what I'm getting at, the system is not strong. If this can happen and an important letter goes to the town clerk, destined really for the eyes of all counselors, and the counselors don't see it, only the chairman gets it, who supervises in part the town clerk and who's best friends of the person who sent the resignation in. Does something have to be tweaked, either with rules or a discussion or something? Now, back in the day, before your time, the town council had their own dedicated secretary. When important matters came in, that secretary was pretty good at screening out the junk mail from the important stuff. And she would make sure every counselor got a copy of the junk mail, and every counselor had their own mailbox in the town council office. So you could go in at any time during the week and pull your stuff from the mailbox. And there for sure, under the old system, would have been a copy of that email advising that Jim Laughlin was, had resigned from the housing authority. Those days are gone. And now this is what you're left with. I just throw that out because there's something wrong with the system if this happened. In any event, let's go on. So Jim Laughlin resigned. No one knew, but everyone knew or should have known that his term was up October 31. That's a matter of public record. That could be a matter of, common knowledge for anyone who asked. The Democrats appeared to be unaware of that. And so, because they just were unaware. I mean, they had every opportunity to know when his term was up, and they had every opportunity to line up a replacement. But that opportunity kind of came and went, and they waited until December to learn that the Republicans had stepped into the void and put Shelby Jackson in front of the Republican Town Committee and brought his name in front of the council, and now the Democrats are upset. Is that a fair narrative, what I just went through?
Yeah, no, I think you described it well. Mhm.
Okay, so is this a case where the Republicans on the council, being in the majority, are now going to ram through all vacancies on all boards with the people they want and ignore what some say is a traditional courtesy of allowing the Democrats to have their choice when it's their turn, when there's a Democratic resignation, allow the town committee to put someone up? Is this signal new times, hardball politics?
I don't think so. I think in this situation, I don't know how Chairman Cervoni found out that Shelby Jackson was interested, or if he went to him or who went to who. But Vinnie Cervoni knew there was an opening, and Shelby Jackson's unaffiliated. I don't think it was that out of line for Vinnie when it was open for several months since the summer apparently. So I don't think this is precedent setting. And now certainly since everybody realized what happened, I would think that both town committees will be more on top of vacancies and putting names forth who they choose. But for any of these, the entire council needs to approve anybody. So no matter which town committee puts it forward, the entire council needs to agree. So,
well, let me ask you this sort of in a hypothetical way. Supposing the Democrats were prompt with this, and they knew that October 31 was going to be the last day for Jim Laughlin's term, had he not resigned earlier, had he, and if back in September they got a name and put someone forward to fill Jim Laughlin's spot as of October 31, and that was the only name in front of the council, the Democrats' choice to replace the resigning Democrat, would the council have acted favorably, do you think, on that Democratic request to have the person of his choice go on the housing authority?
I think so. I don't see why not. I mean, I don't see why I would have any objection to that if it was a Democrat who left and then, was being replaced with another Democrat.
Okay. So do you think it was the delay that kind of caused this problem, the delay in filling the position? I'm trying to get to the nub of the issue.
Yeah, I don't really know. And I didn't talk to Chairman Cervoni about it at all. So I don't know how it all came about. But, like you said, we can assume that Jim Laughlin told Vinnie Cervoni since they worked together. But how Shelby Jackson came into it, I'm not sure. But I'm sure the delay had something to do with it. That there was an open seat. I'm sure the fact that Shelby Jackson's unaffiliated came into play, because it's not like we were replacing a Democrat with a Republican, which would have been a little bit more, I think, egregious to the Democrats. It was someone who was unaffiliated, who everybody, he's held in high esteem in town. So I don't think this is precedent setting. I think it was just sort of an odd situation that presented itself.
Yeah. Okay. So from the Democratic perspective, they felt that their right to choose was infringed, but that may not be true. Let's change the subject and talk about the American Rescue Plan Act, which is $13 million of money that Wallingford is going to get. It has half of it already. It's had it for several months. And there was a discussion at a meeting a couple of weeks ago about how to approach this. And we have some video clips. Again, it's a collage of video clips. It's different parts of a conversation all slammed together.
Okay.
So Christina, the first clip we're going to play is you asking a question about the amount of economic loss the town has suffered, and why do you ask that? And you ask that because if we had economic loss, some of them, to the extent we had economic loss, we could use that money for a variety of things. The federal government is more liberal if we had an economic loss. So you wanted to know how much. And this is how it all went down.
Once we know how much the revenue loss was, it looks like that money is a little bit less strict as to how it can be used. So I'm just wondering, do we have the amount of lost revenue at this point? I don't know if Mr. Senna knows that or anyone knows that.
We do not have that number as of now.
Is that something that's being worked on, or?
Yeah, it's on a very large to-do list that I have.
What'd you think of that? What'd you think of that answer?
Wasn't really the answer I was looking for. I mean, I'm hoping we get the numbers soon and it's at the top of the very large to-do list because it's important to have.
Yeah. So I'm going to go on a rant here. Just bear with me. The amount of revenue loss is a key component as to what you're going to do with the money. It's a key determinant. I mean, you got to know this. And this question should be a very obvious one, should have been a very obvious one to the administration going back to the spring. And it's not very hard to come up with this number. And I thought what you got back was disrespect and snarkiness. You asked a very basic fundamental question they should have the answer to if they were serious, about distributing this money in a thoughtful way. And so you ask an obvious question and frankly, long overdue. And what you get back is, no, we don't have it. And we have other things to do. We're kind of busy. I took offense at that. And I think it's a very bad sign as to how things are going to go. But hey, we got another video clip that continues on the discussion. And this is kind of along the same lines. This is going to be Janice Small talking, the town corporation council.
If you create a lost revenue section of these funds, then it's for use for government services, which would be, at least at this point, a broader term.
Janice Small talking about revenue loss, and since that meeting, I looked into how revenue loss can be calculated. It appears to me that the Internal Revenue Service or the Treasury Department of the federal government has a website. You click on it and there's a worksheet. You fill in the blanks and it computes it for you. It's sort of mechanical. All Tim Cena, the comptroller, has to do is find out what our revenue was in 2019 calendar year, which he can do. That's very simple. His assistant to his assistant could do that. And then plug in a couple of other numbers, looking for the actual revenue for calendar year 2020, 2021, 2020 and 2021, follow the format the federal government has, and your question would have been answered.
My waning hours up here, I think the council is the legislative body of the town of Wallingford, and sometimes we forget that. And sometimes we run from that. Not here.
On the individual side, in terms of, providing relief, you really, you have social service agencies and whatnot who have the expertise. So, I would hope that we would look to draw on that.
So at this discussion on this $13 million fund that you guys have to distribute, there was possibilities mentioned. Janice Small, one of her comments said, it was sort of offhand, and she didn't intend it to be the focus of her comments, but she said, the water division would probably have a lot of ideas how I could use the money. An important thing to say, because I don't think water projects or sewer projects, which the town could use all of its 13 million if it wanted on water and sewer. That hasn't been mentioned yet until that time, I think, at any other council meeting. Your view of using this money for municipal projects like water and sewer upgrades or repairs, your view.
Sure. I'm not a fan of using it for water and sewer, but I am a fan of using it for municipal projects. And the reason why I take water and sewer out of that is because I'm looking for projects that will affect everybody in town, businesses, residents. So basically every single taxpayer in town, every single resident in town. And water and sewer does not affect every single person because some people don't have municipal water and sewer. So the projects I'm looking for would affect everybody. They would save everybody in their taxes. So I'm fine with municipal projects, but not necessarily water and sewer projects.
Well, the mayor's emphasis is on giving it to, he says, small businesses. And he started the ball rolling in that direction, having our consultant design applications for small businesses. And he'll drop, well, individuals too was kind of an afterthought, but he never mentions, public projects, or I think he mentioned once nonprofits. But he wants to go in the way of businesses, give it to businesses. Are you on the same page as he is in that regard?
We're at the beginning phases, but I don't think I am. And I think, everybody knows I'm very pro-business, come from my family business. But in regards to this, I'm afraid that if we go that route, we're picking winners and losers. There's also going to have to be a big bureaucracy to process applications to decide who is eligible, who is not eligible, who's already received money, because there were a lot of opportunities, from various programs for businesses already. There was also concern that by the time we dole out the money, 2023 or 24, that the businesses really don't need it anymore because the effects of COVID, you've kind of overcome them. So, I'm willing to hear him out. The paperwork that's involved in that, I think it's just, we're kind of gonna get into a bit of a mess.
So, what I like to do, because you've been on the show enough and you kind of know I like to do this. I like to look far down the road to see what's coming up, play the chess game 4 or 5 moves ahead, and then look around the corner if we can do that as to where we're really going, rather than the official versions. And it looks like the mayor, based on months really of public statements, columns by Steve Knight, et cetera, the mayor wants to emphasize businesses. Let's say the council does not want to emphasize businesses the way the mayor does. Who has the ultimate power to decide where the money goes? Chris Chartel at that meeting tried to pull teeth from Janice Small to get to that answer, and she kind of danced around it, and Chris was trying to dance a little faster. But I'm not sure that it was clear. Is it clear, do you think, where the power lies if you guys can't agree?
Well, I've kind of spent a lot of time trying to research that and look at the wording and get to the bottom of it. One of the things Attorney Small said is that this money is spent using normal, I believe it was normal appropriation procedures, something to that effect. That's the official language. And to me, that's the council. The council is who appropriates money. And that was the reason why I pushed for that special meeting that we had. And I thought it was a good meeting. We got a lot of things covered and clarified. But that's why I pushed for that, because my fear is that we're just going to keep going down the road. And while the council ultimately is who needs to decide how this money gets spent, if the administration decides how it's going to get spent, and then they say, well, you have to approve it, but then it's too late for us to do anything else, and we don't like that idea. Well, then what? We vote no, and we blow $13 million, and then we won't have time. So my opinion, from what I've read and understand, I think it's more on the council.
Let's sign off until we meet again. Good luck in the new year, and we'll see you soon back on the Citizen Mike Show. Thanks for coming on, and thank our viewers. Thank you for watching the Citizen Mike Show. We try to do this twice a month now. WPAA broadcasts it on their channel at night during the week. And so, as we used to say when we were at WPAA studio, if it's night at night, it's Citizen Mike. Hey, it still is. Good night, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Good night, Christina.